Hello everyone, I am Veos and welcome back to another video. In today's video we'll be building a Star Trek vessel-ish kind of thing looking in Stormworks. Now there really isn't much to be said about this vessel other than I had to make it as small as I could, even though in Stormworks it's freaking huge. I wanted to build something from the original Star Trek or the TOS era with Captain Kirk and Spock, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. I figure the designs of the time, like back in the 60s when they made the series, are things that are very simple shapes, flat edges, things of this nature, which would make the build a lot more easier to create. I would go online and look up different types of sets that they had, the hallways in particular, because I wanted the hallways, the bridge, the engineering section, sick bay, the Jeffries tubes, which were actually quite bright in the original series in comparison to things like the Next Generation and Voyager, which the Jeffries tubes became really dark corridors, dark tunnels. The original TOS, it was bright and it was white paint and all the pipes and everything were color coded. I wanted to give it that military gray look that the TOS era was using at the time. They were going for a very navy kind of feel. Pipes were color coded, things of this nature. You had reds and grays. A lot of the lights though, you had some purple lights and you had some green lights. I tried to put those in there later on. In the hallways, you'd have a very basic gray hallway, but I noticed that the doors were color-coded. There were blue doors, red doors, gold doors. There were panels on the walls. There were these red cages that really wouldn't block anything off. They were just kind of there for aesthetic, I guess. But they really gave that 1960s space adventure television series feel. I only had enough room to build something that was about 2 decks. On the bottom deck would be the cargo bay, the transporter room, a hallway, gotta have the hallway, sick bay, and a deflector room. On the very, very bottom of the ship, though, would be things like fuel systems of some kind, but I wanted it to be really dark, really like the basement almost. Something that the captain would send a crew member down to clean if that crew member was on the shit list. Above the first deck, there'd be another series of corridors, or excuse me, like Jeffries tubes. But I didn't want the Jeffries tubes to be completely just for looks. I wanted them to actually house things like systems and logic boards and all that good stuff to make doors work and whatnot. I needed at least one elevator. You gotta have a turbo lift, right? So I wanted to do a turbo lift. It came out all right, although it took a long while for me to figure everything out. It's not as easy as one would think. There are plenty of videos that I had to look up online in order to figure out how to make most of this shit work. I know I wanted the doors to open when you walk up to them, kind of like the original series. So in order to make that happen, as soon as the person walks up to the door, there's a sensor just above them, and once the sensor reads a negative number or something like that, basically the person walking underneath of it would open the door. Some of the doors didn't have that sensor, either because I ran out of room or it just made sense to have that door in particular open up manually with a button, kind of like lock it and unlock it, kind of like the captain's quarters or something. You don't want to just be able to walk up to it and have it open up to anybody. You want to be able to, have like a key card or a password or something to open it up. Just little things like that I was thinking about when I made the vessel. The second deck pretty much housed the crew, the officers, and the captain. Had a little mess hall. It would have the bridge, the ready room, the assembly room for like officers and the captain to sit down and talk about their next mission or something of that nature. Further back would be the actual engineering section. And like I said before, I tried to look at the different pictures of the original engineering. It had like a cage with all these pipes and stuff that seemed to go back for a very long hundreds of feet. Of course, I didn't have hundreds of feet to work with, so I just made something a little smaller. Made sure to put that red cage around there somewhere. There was like a little platform in the middle that had chrome domes on it. Apparently it was the top of the warp core, but because the ship is so small for me to build, I mimicked it, but I don't know where you'd actually fit a warp core in that sucker. Looks cool though. But I made sure to put like Jeffries tubes everywhere. I was going Jeffrey tube crazy, I think. There was Jeffrey tubes that connected pretty much to almost the entire ship. So if anything bad was to happen, you could, in theory, just use the Jeffries tubes to get to where you needed to go without people seeing you in the hallways. A bit overkill, but this was like the very first ship I ever made on Stormworks. Now, the design I was going for the aesthetic of the way the ship looked was it needed to fit, of course, inside of the Stormworks hangar bay, or in this case the blimp bay. I think it's a DLC. I had all the DLCs downloaded, but apparently after a while, the ship got so big and so complex that everything was starting to slow down. The frame rate was just nasty, which was really sad because I was really looking forward to walking around the ship without any frame rate problems. And I kept on hearing about a bunch of people that would make huge creations and not have any frame rate drop, and I'm sitting here with like 4 frames per second going, what the fuck? But anyway, I knew the ship was going to be small, so there wasn't going to be a saucer section or anything of that nature. It wasn't going to be your typical original series Federation ship. So I went for more of like a very large shuttlecraft look or feel. I figured it could have some wings in the back, kind of give it that cool factor, but the blimp bay that I was building this thing in, which I think is one of the largest areas you can build in, it didn't have enough room for the wings. So instead of building the wings outright, I have them fold in so that when you bring the vessel out into the world, you can just unfold the wings and have them come out, so it'd be a lot bigger than what it was in the construction phase. I wanted the bay to be, or I wanted the cargo bay to have a nice big open door. It'd have like a ramp that would slide out so people could get on and off and cargo and whatnot. I also wanted like a type of airlock on the side, just in case it was one of those deals where you didn't have to constantly open up the cargo bay door in order to have people come in and out. You could have a small door on the side that could do the same thing. I wanted the controls to not only be on the inside of the cargo bay itself to be able to control the door opening and locking, but I also wanted those controls to be in the bridge, because why wouldn't you have controls to your ship's cargo bay and side door directly in the bridge to either override or control it from up there? I would put the warp nacelles on the top, try to make them a decent size but not too big or too small. Tried to go for the original Gene Roddenberry rule for the warp drive, have them facing each other. Make sure you had 2, because the way he had it, 2 warp engines work together to create the warp field. Originally had it, I should say, because after he lost, after he was kind of pushed to the side by the network, they started coming out with 1 warp nacelle ships and other ships that had warp nacelles, but they didn't see each other on the sides because the ship was in the middle. They kind of just said, screw you, Gene, and did their own thing. But I tried to go for more of what he had planned, because it made sense on a mechanical engineering level. There was these 2 nacelles, and they created a warp field in the middle of themselves, so that space had to be clear. If there was something in the middle, that warp field couldn't be properly generated, and if anything was inside there when the warp field was being generated, it'd either be warped, destroyed, bent, it would overheat, it would, something bad, not pleasant would happen. But anyway, I digress. I couldn't make the nacelles glow, because in the original series they never glowed blue on the sides. It glowed red for the collectors in the front, had little glowy lights and stuff, but there were never any blue sides. Nothing was blue. That was much later. Like I think Next Generation was the one that had the blue sides for the warp nacelles. Everything prior to that, there was no blue sides to any frickin' warp nacelles. I didn't really know how to make the Bassard collectors, I think I'm saying that right, glow red, so I just made them gold for now. I think it looks nice for what's available in the game. But the thing about it is I couldn't just stop there and make it look cool. I wanted it to work, to actually be able to fly and eventually maybe even go into space. So I packed a crap ton of fuel on it. I actually had to do little experiments, practicing on tiny little experiments, trying to see how the hell fuel would work and rocket power. I looked up more videos on helicopter and how to make a helicopter hover, and then after that, instead of having propellers and a blade, I'd put rockets. I'd steal the logic planning behind it and attach it to rockets rather than an engine with blades. And it actually worked really well. I was surprised, but that worked only for the small prototypes. When I tried to put the same knowledge and systems on what I had just built, I found out the hard way that if you build something without a prior idea of what the fuck you're doing, you're gonna run into some problems. And in my case, it was weight distribution. Had I built the craft more or less like if I was going to build something from KSP to make sure there was equal amount of mass on either side. It would have been a lot easier for me, but unfortunately I kind of went off the deep end and kind of went to more of a creative mode than a engineering mode. And so I had to develop a system where each engine would not only talk to each other, but also try to maintain its own altitude, so that even if the weight was more on one side than the other side, that one engine would perform with more power in order to keep that part of the ship upright. It was absolute torture, freaking hellish. Sometimes it would work perfectly, and then the other times it wouldn't work at all. Even if I didn't do anything with it, it would stop working. So I'm guessing that it's because of the size of the ship that the game itself was kind of bugging out, and so things would work at first and then at second time wouldn't. So there's no consistency there because of the sheer size of the vessel. But when I did get it to work, it was actually really great. It was pretty cool. I could imagine if I ever go back to this, I would build something that would not only look cool but actually be functional. It could like pick up crates or something, deliver people. It'd be a much smaller vessel. It wouldn't be 2 decks. It'd be more akin to an actual shuttlecraft rather than a frigate-sized ship, or maybe closer to Corvette class. I'm gonna go for more of a frigate. Yeah, it's frigate-ish kinda, but I definitely would make it with the flying bit in mind so that everything was equalized. But there she is, everyone, the USS Raven prototype. Can't go into space. Not because it doesn't have the fuel or the rocket power, but because it doesn't have the logic to maintain its control without spinning out of control. And plus it's, you know, 5 frames per second, which doesn't make everything. It makes everything pretty hard to play. But yeah, I thought it looked really cool, really neat. I learned a lot about the original series. I even started watching the original series again. It's goofy sometimes. Other times it's like, what? But for the most part, if you sit there and watch it with an open mind, you're like, okay, that's pretty cool, you know, because the story was meant for this and that. But anyway, I'm going to be working on some KSP stuff here pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being a part of this channel. Love you all, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. Bye-bye.